accident quietly struck. And just 10 minutes ago, Aye and I were soaking in the legendary hero's spring to heal our wounds quickly to initiate our revenge plan. I spend 25 hours every day soaking in it. Although there's always a shameless guy competing with me for resources, fortunately, this hero's spring hasn't been used by anyone for 2.5 years. Even if 2 people soak at the same time, dividing the spring's blessing power equally, it won't significantly impact the healing of my injuries. At this moment, Aye suddenly tells me that she has long known those merchants are unscrupulous. Profiteering is just their usual practice, but she wouldn't stop such behavior. Because Aye thinks the diamonds mined by the barbarians are utterly useless. They can neither be eaten nor used. They are just good for decoration because they are pretty. Hearing this, I mocked her for her lack of insight. Then I asked again, "Do you know how many ears of corn a diamond can be exchanged for in the Empire?" Unexpectedly, Aye boldly claimed it would be at most 20 or 30 ears. It seems she does not understand the Empire's prices at all. Seeing this, I smiled. Are diamonds really so worthless in your eyes? That thing is one of the most expensive gems in the world. Take the goods the merchant brought that day, for instance. Just one alone could easily be exchanged for everything. Hearing this, Aye was so shocked that her jaw almost dropped. Ever since she was born, the value of food has always been her top priority. But then, Aye treats me like a slave again. This makes me very angry. Thereupon, I solemnly reminded her, I am now a member of the barbarians. From now on, please address me with my great name. As soon as these words fell, Aye's voice suddenly became deep. Then she used her hand to lift up my chin. I neither want you to be my slave, nor do I want to call you Bijier. What I want is your all. Unexpectedly, before her love could be expressed, 4 little brats suddenly popped up from behind. At this moment, Aye was extremely embarrassed. Before he could even gather his composure, those little brats came up, asking to be petted and hugged, leaving me alone, stunned, standing there. With my high EQ of 180, I really couldn't guess what Aye actually wanted me to do. But seeing the little brats playing recklessly in the hero's spring, Aye immediately scolded them angrily. If you want to play, go play on the shore. This place is a gift from the chieftain to Bijier. Once the effect is halved again, his recovery period will need to be even longer. After hearing this, I immediately started laughing at Aye. Didn't you say that stinginess would never occur among the barbarian tribes? Now how come you're suddenly fussing over minor things like a child? Very quickly, Alan brought over 2 little girls and told me and Aye, this is a command just issued by the tribal chief. Because these children had eaten glass beads sold by traders, the chief wants the Spring of Heroes to detoxify them for him. Aye was immediately so infuriated that she bared her teeth in anger. You should know that she had prepared this series of plans for a full 2.5 months. Thus, she resolutely decided to go back and seriously settle accounts with her mother. What I never expected was Alan actually took the initiative to apologize to me. It turns out his sister was also a victim of the glass beads. If it weren't for me exposing the merchant's conspiracy, he might have lost his most beloved sister. For this, I simply replied with an, "Oh, after all, this is what I should do." Nevertheless, Alan confidently reminded me that apologizing doesn't mean admitting defeat to him. He made a pact with me for a one-on-one duel in 2 years. Upon hearing this, I showed a face of disdain. If you are capable, just try it. But by then, don't be more of a loser than you are now. And Aye, seeing Alan in this state, felt a past anxiety being released. As for that sentence, let's talk about it later. After all, we are both only 15 years old right now. There's still a long time ahead. In the blink of an eye, 2 years have passed. The one-on-one challenge I made with Alan was also realized. But before we could finish a round, he was defeated by my hand. However, while Alan and the others were shocked, I myself was no exception. I never expected that after gaining the power from the hero's spring, my strength has actually improved so much. Seeing Alan unable to continue the one-on-one fight with me, I then decided to do something even more important. At this moment, Alan's follower suddenly said, I heard that Kid's archery skills are now on par with Aye. If you ask me, he's a monster now. But another follower completely disagreed. If it were him, He could punch Alan's nose and make it bleed. Hearing this, Alan corrected his misunderstanding. Because it wasn't fists that hurt his nose, it was the wind of the punch I swung. At the same time, I arrived in front of a huge stone wall and left 6 huge indentations on it. Clearly, my strength has already broken through to the 6th sword technique. Although there is still a long way to go to reach the most complete and strongest 10th sword technique, to have reached this level at 17 has been unheard of since the founding of the Empire. Meanwhile, my Sword of Gluttony can now absorb and replicate 6 skills. It can be said that my strength is now infinitely close to Hugo, plus the assassination techniques learned in a previous life and the newly learned barbarian archery skills. The plan for revenge will be advanced earlier. The scene shifts. Aye and I are pursuing a giant snake. Judging from the traces it left behind, the size of the prey is enough to feed everyone for 3 meals. But Aye, who is always the most cautious when hunting, this time seemed preoccupied with heavy thoughts. However, when Aye noticed me observing her, her cheeks immediately flushed. She quickly turned to pet Brooke to ease the awkwardness, but ultimately she couldn't keep it hidden. I saw her pull out a dagger from behind and she told me, this was found on an Imperial captive, although one fortunately escaped, and from the serpent pattern on it, I was certain this is exclusive for the Levi's family, one of the 7 great families of the Empire. But when Aye saw my serious face, she suddenly asked me, Bigier, do you want to return to Baskerville? Hearing this, I was instantly speechless, not knowing how to respond. However, what Aye said next made me realize that this place is not suitable to stay for long, because in these 2 years, the woman I once captured has always come to the barbaric tribes, and she says she seeks an imperial person. I think her target must be you, Bigier. People who often play dead know the best way to disguise oneself is to hide one's power. But my fiancé Camus refuses to be superstitious. Although the danger level of the giant octopus spider is considered epic, she still believes that with my strength, I could not possibly be defeated so easily. So during the time I was faking my death, Camus went mad searching the flood-stricken forest carpet style. Even though not even a slight trace could be found, she never gave up. And just 2.5 minutes ago, Aye suddenly launched a soul interrogation on me. She asked if I wanted to return to the Baskerville Empire, but I originally faked my death just to seek revenge. How could I easily go back? However, the words Aye said next left me utterly astonished. She spoke tactfully. That woman whom I had once caught always appears in the flooded forest. According to reliable information from the barbarian sentinels, she is looking for an imperial person. I think her target is you, Bigier. And Aye also told me that she has come to the flooded forest more than once or twice. Ever since both parties encountered the attack of the giant octopus spider, that woman has been conducting a thorough search with her team. Then Aye reluctantly asked again, do you want to go back with her? I feel like she really cares about you. After listening to Aye's series of remarks, I put on a solemn face and began to contemplate all the possible decisions ahead. But as for whether I will return to Baskerville or not, I have always had only one answer in my heart. That is impossible. Even though this feels somewhat unfair to Camus' dedication to me. But in order to annihilate Baskerville, I had to hide to break through to the 10th sword technique. As for Aye, upon hearing that I do not wish to return to the Empire, she remained silent for a while, then showed a happy expression towards me. It turns out she always thought I stayed with the barbarians because I lost contact with the Empire. Now she is finally relieved. From now on, I can hunt various powerful prey with him and Brooke together. As for me, I also breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that the people from the Empire still cannot confirm whether I am alive or not. And after being able to perfectly hide my strength, I will absolutely not let Hugo easily find any trace of my presence. But speaking of which, Camus has been ceaselessly looking for me. It's likely also a task in the diplomacy between the 2 tribes. But I remember the early relations between the 2 clan leaders were not very friendly. Could it be because of my death that this time the diplomatic ties have become stronger? Looking at it this way, sooner or later, I must secretly sneak out of the flooded forest to investigate the situation outside. Just at this moment, irregular bubbles suddenly started emerging continuously from the pond. Following that, a giant fish stretching 16 meters long burst forth. Aye saw this and felt nothing unusual because such fish dare to leap from water to land. It signifies that the rainy season is preparing to descend upon the forest, and judging from its size, this rainy season should be a long one. However, what I am focused on is not the size of the fish, but why there is a spear lodged in its belly. As I slashed with my sword, what suddenly appeared before us was a corpse eroded by stomach acid, reduced to only bones and tattered clothing. From the necklace he wore, Aye was able to assert that the person swallowed by the fish was from the barbaric Rococo tribe. However, such fish would not normally attack humans. They are so dull, they only hunt creatures that are already dead. Thus, to get to the bottom of this, we decided to head towards the Rococo encampment, because it's likely that some disaster had occurred there. We quickly reached our destination with Aye before evening, but the scene before us made us hesitate in fear and dread. This 5-year-old child was known as the cursed one destined to die, simply because all 250 villagers died unnatural deaths. Only he was left alone, unharmed. However, when I learned of his identity and origin, I realized a great disaster was about to befall the barbaric tribes. Just now, Aye and I found a fierce skeleton inside the belly of a fish. From the special necklace worn by this person, Aye determined that he was from the Rococo tribe, also a barbaric group. Moreover, a very serious doubt arose because such fish are naturally born with an extremely low intelligence of -2.5 points. They usually feed on completely dead and decaying corpses. Furthermore, humans are the creatures they fear the most. How could they possibly actively attack humans? In order to investigate and find out what really happened, I decided to take Aye with me to look into it, because it is very likely that a severe disaster has already occurred there. As expected, when Aye and I just arrived, the tragic scene that appeared made us step back. All the Rococo warriors guarding the entrance of the clan had all died. Their bodies were covered with strange red spots. Having been out in the world in my previous life, I have already experienced and witnessed various injuries and diseases, red spots along with symptoms of diarrhea and vomiting. This is clearly that terrible contagious disease, Red Death. The appearance of red spots will continue to vomit, diarrhea, general weakness, and severe pain, eventually torturing one's mind and body to death. In a previous life, due to its large-scale outbreak and uncontrollability, it nearly killed all the barbarians. At the same time, Aye also noticed something unusual. It was the time when the tribe should be eating, but there was not a trace of cooking smoke from the Rococo's camp. So we enter resolutely without any slack. Yet there's no sign of villagers' activity here at all. Moreover, at this time, it's impossible that everyone is sleeping. But seeing the overgrown weeds on the ground indicates that the people of Rococo have not tended to it for a long time. At this moment, Aye lifts the flap of a nearby tent. Suddenly, countless flies rush out swiftly. As for the scene that appears inside, it even causes Aye to feel suffocated. She hurriedly covered her mouth and shouted at me, "Bigier, there are many bodies here, already dead and half decomposed by worms." However, the side I am investigating is no exception. It seems they had been tormented by the epidemic and died a long time ago. It's quite possible that those warriors at the door are some of the stronger warriors who wanted to escape the disaster. Their strong physical condition allowed them to run a few more kilometers. At this very moment, Aye suddenly shouted, "Bigier, we must hurry and leave Rococo's village. It has already been cast with a terrible curse." Upon hearing this, I told her there was no need to panic so much. From the symptoms of the dead, this is just a contagious disease, and moreover, it is very difficult to spread to others. Aye immediately angrily accused me. "If both you and I are affected, it could likely harm even more people later on. Listen to me and run quickly." But I completely ignored what Aye said. Then I told her, "It seems that the Rococo tribe has not been completely wiped out. Judging from the number of deaths, it's very likely that the survivors abandoned the sick and dying and fled to another place. Then I decided to go and scavenge for some useful things. But I hadn't gone far when suddenly a faint breathing sound came from behind Aye. By the time I heard her chilling scream, Aye was so scared that her legs gave out and she collapsed to the ground. She pointed at the entrance of the tent in front. There stood a child who appeared to be only about 5 years old. So I told Aye to go ahead first. As for what follows, let me handle it alone. But this person turned out to be unreasonable, lying that she had twisted her leg and couldn't move at all. Seeing this, I turned and walked away. Approaching the child, I asked, "Are you a child from the Rococo tribe?" After listening, he tremblingly uttered 3 words: Rococo, slave, kitchen maid. It seems that this child is a slave captured by Rococo from the Empire. But why is she the only one still alive here? So I asked repeatedly, but the child's answers were irrelevant, telling me her name is Bomarian. Her father is La Baskerville. Hearing this, my heart couldn't help but tremble. Could it be? Here he comes. The true identity of the little girl is finally revealed. She is not only a direct descendant of the Baskerville family, but also an impure hybrid born to a barbarian man. It turns out the Baskerville family has 3 middle names. They are, respectively, Half, Thunder, as well as Pulling. The owner of the Half-character middle name is from a collateral line of Baskervilles. The character Lay represents males in the direct line. As for the character La, it represents females in the direct line. And the little girl's name is Bomarian L. Baskerville, along with her red eyes and a pocket watch she wears on her chest with a hound emblem confirming that the Baskerville blood flows within her. However, at first, I thought she was a child kidnapped by barbarians from the Empire. Only when I saw the old photo inside the pocket watch did I realize the severity of the situation, because the man standing on the left in the photo turned out to be my father, Hugo, and the woman sitting on the right then is Hugo's first wife, Roxana. So I immediately questioned Bomarian. Who are all the people in this photo? What is your relationship with them? But my stern expression and heartless retort, however, it terrified Bomarian, making her tremble all over. She began to panic and continuously moved backwards. Seeing this, Aye was utterly speechless. After all, Bomarian is still young. Such aggressive questioning would naturally make any child instinctively dodge and fear. Hearing this, my instinctive reaction was that I was anxious to get an answer. However, this was also due to the memories of my past life, which made my emotions easily out of control. Then, I squeezed out a smile and asked again, "Bomarian, can you tell me who all these people are in the photo?" Although Aye is still not satisfied with my performance, fortunately, Bomarian finally started to speak. He pointed to each person in the photo and said, "This is Grandpa, Mom, and Grandma. My memory goes back to the time when I was first summoned by Hugo to be an official. At that time, the butler John had mentioned this. Actually, my father has always been a sentimental person towards his family. Even though many people do not agree with this assessment of him, in John's eyes, it is so. It's just that the story has to start from before the First Lady Roxana passed away. Among Hugo's many beauties, his favorite lady was Roxana. The two of them also gave birth to their love crystal, Penelope. But the good times did not last long. Penelope was kidnapped by barbarians in an accident, and after Hugo learned of this tragic news, he resolutely decided to let the Empire assign him to the border. In the days that followed, he began an endless, frenzied massacre of the barbarian tribes. But ultimately, he couldn't find even a trace of Penelope. It was only years later that Hugo became the cold, ruthless man he is today. Having children was no longer about producing a crystallization of love, but rather about cultivating more ruthless killing machines. At this moment, I hurriedly looked at Bomarian, although I was initially skeptical when the butler John first spoke these words. But now there is irrefutable evidence before my eyes. It's impossible not to believe it. Hugo's hatred for the barbaric tribes has reached its peak. If he knew his granddaughter was born of the bloodline of his enemy, I'm afraid Bomarian will be sentenced to death on the spot. But that's all in the future. The most important thing now is to settle Bomarian. Seeing her like this, she was definitely treated like a slave among the Rococo barbarians. But just at this moment, Bomarian suddenly pointed at me and said, "Your eyes are just like your mother's. Mom once told me, if one day you meet someone with red eyes, you must let that person take you away from here." After saying this, Bomarian just stared blankly at the pile of stones behind him. It seems this is definitely Penelope's grave, and this memory became the unexpected encounter of 2 stray dogs of Baskerville. In the days that followed, no matter what I am doing, wherever I go, Bomarian always stays close to me. The loneliness that only one person can experience, I fear, has deeply imprinted on her heart. But even though Bomarian relies on me for survival, I still feel she shouldn't stay with me in the barbarian tribe forever. At the very least, she should be sent to a more developed area of the Empire for education. Later, I took her to the barbarian tribe's meeting room. To prevent the spread of the epidemic, Aquila then convened an emergency meeting, ready to collect more reliable suggestions from the tribe. And there will also be a prolonged rainy season coming, which undoubtedly provides the best environment for the spread of the plague. Suddenly, the shaman Ashuman proposed a solution because he always felt that this plague was a curse. If we want to lift it, a large-scale memorial ceremony must be held. But because I had previously told Aye, this plague has absolutely nothing to do with a curse. Instead, it is a contagious disease named the Red Death. Therefore, Aye immediately rejected Ashuman's suggestion. She thought they should evacuate the place they were currently residing in and find a new place to settle. But hardly had she finished speaking, Aye quickly faced unanimous criticism and reprimand from the Council of Elders. To them, this land had been a treasure where generations had lived for over a century. How could they simply abandon it so easily? Fortunately, most people are rational. They more strongly agree with Aye's suggestion. If the plague really spreads here, for children with weaker immunity, it is undoubtedly a deadly poison. At this moment, the elders and villagers were divided into two factions, arguing incessantly in the meeting room. As for which suggestion to implement next, the decision-making power was tightly held in Aquila's hands. Only they all didn't know the severity of this plague is already comparable to the Black Death that once struck the Empire, and its spread is only accelerating. Although the Empire was indeed threatened by death at that time, fortunately, there was Camus's fire magic and the Saintess sent by the Kovadis family. It was only by the joint efforts of these two that the spread of the plague was resisted. But this was limited to the Empire. Barbarian tribes and most neighboring countries were wiped out one after another. This should also be a great piece of news for the Empire. However, everyone was wrong. In the days without barbaric tribes, the food chain in the flood forests became disordered, and then the monsters began to overflow. The attacks were all directed towards the Empire. Fortunately, at that time, the Baskerville power was very strong, barely resisting the threat of the beast tide. And this also became the opportunity for Hugo to expand his territory. So in order not to repeat history, I decided to help the barbaric tribes. I see myself raising my hand to tell Aquila, I have the best solution to stop the plague from spreading. I simply heated the river water to 120 degrees. This shocked everyone present enormously, because this turned out to be the most effective method to deal with the plague infection. However, to convince the entire barbarian tribe, I decided to conduct a human infection experiment. So I immediately instructed Aye to capture a few goblins that nobody wanted for even $9.99, and then submerge them halfway in a vat filled with river water. The experimental results were quickly presented. All the goblins soaked in water were infected with the Red Death. They were immediately thrown into the fire for on-site cremation to curb the spread of the plague. Next, the water in the tanks was boiled and left to cool for a control experiment. Finally, after soaking the remaining goblins, those immersed in boiled water indeed did not show plague rashes. Seeing this, the people of the tribe were relieved. They had finally found a way to overcome the Red Death. For this, Aquila decided to hold a commendation ceremony for me to congratulate me for saving our entire tribe once again. Upon hearing this, I told her that we must not be complacent because boiling water is just a small part of preventing plague infection. We still must. But I hadn't finished speaking when Ashuman, who had just been mocked by Aye, suddenly spoke up. Stop your foolish wishful thinking. Avoiding the water can't last long. In a few days, the rainy season will come. When the time comes, the river water will flow into the forest. The mist in the air may also be capable of spreading the plague. When Ashuman said this, the minds of the tribe members were instantly blocked. They began to realize the great limitations of boiling water. But Ashuman had not felt proud for even 2.5 seconds when his expression suddenly became panicked. It turns out that I had anticipated these subsequent problems after telling the people present, and I had also found the most advantageous method, which is to relocate the tribe's settlement. However, it is not about abandoning the territory passed down by the ancestors, but rather the village is relocated upward based on the existing foundation. As soon as this was said, people of the ethnic group began to discuss it with doubts. This fantastical design truly touched upon their areas of ignorance. As time went on, a massive rainy season descended upon the land of red and black. Many areas that were once plains were washed into swamps by the river. The flood forests where the barbarian tribes lived were no exception. Looking around, there was hardly a place left to stand. According to the elders of the Presbyterian Church, this rainy season severity is the most terrifying one ever recorded. Yet now they can still sit in their tents and freely discuss the rise and fall of the world. It's all thanks to the migration plan I whimsically proposed to move the tents of the tribe onto the tall, thick trunks of trees, where simple ladders between them allow for easy movement. Little did they know, just after the camp setup was completed, an uninvited guest came to visit. Suddenly, a dark shadow emerged in the river below, followed by a ferocious beast fish with hundreds of sharp teeth violently bursting out of the water surface, beginning indiscriminate strikes against the tents on the trees. Seeing that dinner is being served, the strange fish also opens its gaping maw, ready to swallow both men together. Fortunately, at this moment, Aye timely draws his weapon. A magical arrow shot steadily hits the vital spot of the monstrous fish. "Get the hell out of here now, you despicable, shameful failure among fish." Meanwhile, I ask Aye with confusion, "What's the story behind this monstrous fish?" Upon hearing this, Aye then explained, "It is the overlord Arowana king of this area, and it's also the monster that most likes to attack humans. As for why it is called the Scourge of the Fishes, it is because it secured its position as the overlord through its backstabbing tactics. But no matter what, deliberately destroying the fruits of others' labor should be duly punished." After saying that, I jumped down towards the location of the Arowana king, and then I awakened the long-dormant Sword of Gluttony. This time, it can also have a good feast. If luck is on my side, I might even secure some rather useful secret techniques. As I wield countless sword strokes skimming past the Dragonfish King, the moment it was attacked, it let out a hysterical roar, something unexpected to me. My all-out strike couldn't even scratch its skin. Before I could attack again, the Dragonfish King flipped and rushed into the river, fleeing hurriedly towards the distance. Yet, although I didn't execute it on the spot, my brave combat against the enemy still received unanimous cheers from my people, all shouting that BGA is the hero of the barbarians. Only Ashuman was left, clenching his fists in anger, because if this continues, my position will sooner or later completely overshadow his shaman status. As for Aye, she excitedly gave a thumbs up, thinking to herself, "This BGA is definitely a reliable man worthy of a lifetime commitment." After the turmoil has settled, I then returned to the tent to start making dinner. But clearly this meal was meant for my niece, Bomarian. Yet Aye, this creature, shamelessly followed along. However, seeing both of them immersed in the delicious food I made, I really couldn't bear to send away this freeloader. But still, no matter what, paying for a meal is only right. Upon hearing this, Aye again claimed that I was her slave. The master doesn't have to pay when eating the slave's food. And at this moment, our quarrel was witnessed by Bomarian. The next second after adding the ingredients, her words struck like lightning. "Uncle, Sister Aye, you two look like a married couple." These are the words Aye loves to hear the most. Holding Bomarian, she started to boast wildly. As for me, I was speechless. I already have a fiancé in the Empire. But just at this moment, the tent curtain was suddenly pulled open. As I turned around, amplified by the thunder, the figure was like a walking corpse. Aye immediately questioned, "What are your intentions coming to BGA's tent in the middle of the night?" Not until seeing the person's cheeks clearly did I realize it was Alan, his eyes soaked with tears. "BGA, I beg you, please, you must save my sister." Meanwhile, at Alan's residence, his sister's body was continuously breaking out in alarming red rashes, accompanied by a high fever of 42 degrees. This is an infectious disease that even the renowned healer Hua Tuo would cautiously avoid. Yet the man entrusted his sick sister to someone who has absolutely no medical knowledge. It turns out that regarding the causes and preventive measures of infectious diseases, I understand them better than anyone else in our clan. Although Alan's grandfather, Ashuman, always felt that the Red Death was a curse, he believed that only a grand ritual could completely remove it. But seeing his own sister had already spiked a fever of 42 degrees, he still decided to abandon superstition and choose to believe in science for medical treatment, the only way to obtain the antidote. However, this was strongly opposed by Aye. Just now, Aye and I arrived at Alan's residence, and at this moment, lying on the blanket, is Ashu, the sister afflicted with the Red Death. Seeing her spots spreading at a rate visible to the naked eye, I then asked Alan when his sister first showed symptoms. Alan then responded, "Yesterday, remember when Ashu followed him to the swampy area in search of building materials?" At the same time, Aye also appeared very anxious, wondering if I had already found a cure. But just as I was about to reveal the specific plan, a heavy footstep interrupted our conversation. Turning around, the one who walked into Alan's tent was his grandfather, Ashuman. So, I have always emphasized to you all, ignoring the words of the elders leads to immediate losses. Now it's good. Ashu is probably already at death's door. You all just keep believing in that imperial person. Hearing this, Alan tactfully asked Ashuman not to speak so unpleasantly. After all, I am now a member of the barbarian clan. As soon as the words were uttered, Ashuman harshly rewarded Alan with a big slap. Damn, what a useless guy. You are just as cowardly as your parents. After the scolding, Ashuman then opened the umbrella. Before he left, he reminded once again, this Red Death is not the contagion the people of the Empire speak of, but a curse that can only be lifted by holding a ritual. Now that things have escalated to this point, he has also decided to find the tribal chief early to gather the necessary items for the ritual. Upon hearing this, Aye was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She could not believe that her own mother actually believed Ashuman's nonsense. As for Alan, he was silently shedding tears, really afraid that Ashu's life would be taken away by the disease. Just at this moment, my single remark rekindled Alan's hope for a resolution. I have a way to cure the Red Death disease. But before that, I seriously instructed Alan to sterilize any items used by Ashu at high temperatures. Also, to ignite mugwort on the bonfire to drive away the mosquitoes and bats nearby, because those are the most likely carriers of infectious pathogens. Only by accomplishing all these can a sanitary environment be created to alleviate Ashu's condition. Upon hearing this, Alan immediately wiped away his tears and cheered up and promised me that he would do these things perfectly. While Aye, who was observing and learning, also believed that I could help Ashu recover. But just as I was about to speak about the next treatment plan, Aye's expression suddenly became blank. If the clan leader knew about this, he would surely be severely punished. But I still emphasized repeatedly the importance of this action. Now the only way to get the medicine for Ashu is to leave the flood and head to the Empire. Upon hearing this, Aye immediately became irritable. BGA, you must understand that you are now a member of the barbarian tribe. Going out must be approved by the tribal chief. But our mother adheres to very high principles. She would absolutely not agree to treat our people using the Empire's methods. Hearing this, I remained calm and composed, because I believe that as long as you secretly take me out of the flooded forest and come back unnoticed, no one will find out for sure. At this moment, my eyes became unusually determined. Although Aye's mood is extremely complex, but to save Ashu, he agreed anyway. So upon learning the exact route out of the flood-affected forest, I immediately set out on the journey back to the Empire with Bamarian. But just then, I suddenly realized that someone was following me. So I immediately stopped in my tracks. I just found out that the one tracking me is Aye. Didn't you agree to let me go to the Empire to find the medicine for treatment? Why are you still following me? Are you afraid that I will run away? After hearing this, Aye's face became stern. She requested that I take her with me to the Empire, or at least tell her exactly where I am going. Naturally, both of these things are secrets to me. Even to Aye, I cannot disclose them. Ultimately, I refused all her requests, one by one. So Aye asked again, "Why did you take Bomarian away? Is it because you don't trust the barbarians enough? But do you know why I trust BGA so much as I do? When we first met, it was you who stepped forward to rescue me from a slave auction. This kindness is a memory I can never erase in my lifetime. And from the first day you became my slave, you obeyed my every command unconditionally. Though later in our time together, we became people of the same tribe. Emotions have grown increasingly intimate. But regarding your background and that mysterious sword in your hand, I have not asked too much. For you, I can give my all. Even if it means defying my entire family for you, I am willing. All because I really like you, BGA. and during those times we spent hunting, they are the most cherished memories in my mind. That was the beginning of our most harmonious interaction. When I faced danger, you were able to save me from the bear's attack despite your injuries. Afterwards, we spent a long time together in the hot springs. It was also the first time I mustered the courage to express my feelings of love towards you. I'm really, really afraid of losing you, and there is always a knot in my heart. That is, as long as I get an answer from you, you will completely disappear from my sight. So, I chose to bury all these feelings in my heart. After saying this, Aye slowly lowered her head, but my one sentence filled his heart with overflowing happiness again. I will definitely come back. Please be sure to wait for me. Meanwhile, in the city where I once ruled, Vicky is staying up late, sorting files without a second thought. But suddenly, he walks to the window, staring blankly at the bright moonlight in the sky. It turns out Vicky was reminiscing about the times we spent together. Though it was tough back then, I also felt quite fulfilled. It was then he rediscovered the meaning of his life. Just hard for Vicky to accept that farewell when I headed for the border turned out to be our last meeting. But just a second later, Vicky's expression swiftly turned from sorrow to shock when he saw me appearing upside down before him. Vicky, long time no see. How have you been these years? I, to kill my own father, actually chose to sacrifice my life in a duel with demons. It turns out that in my past life, I died under my father's tyranny. Now, living another life, I possess much stronger powers. Not only have I absorbed all the grace of the river of the underworld, but I have also acquired the gluttonous sword that can devour skills, and even mastered the violent archery techniques of the barbarian tribes. Before I learn the 10th sword technique of Baskerville, I have to find a way to escape the sight of my father Hugo. That's why I decided to use the power of the giant octopus spider, pretending that I had died in battle. But today, I suddenly returned to the Baskerville Empire. Although I have only mastered the 6th sword technique so far, but in order to rid the barbarians of the threat of the Red Death, I must take this risk, and my plan next. But just when Vicky saw me suddenly appear upside down in front of him, he was almost scared out of his wits by me. Luckily, I explained in time that I was still alive. Vicky's emotions then gradually stabilized. Unexpectedly, the next second he couldn't hold back, and he began to cry loudly. He really didn't expect to see me again in his lifetime. Seeing that Vicky was still loyal to me, I felt reassured to leave Bumerian in his care. At the beginning, Vicky thought that Bumerian was the offspring I had with the barbarian tribe. Hearing this, I immediately denied his speculation. I had only faked my death for 2.5 years. Bumerian, no matter how you look at it, couldn't be this small. Following that, my reply to Vicky is that the descendants of the direct Baskerville line all look quite similar. However, in the subsequent conversation, Vicky was quite puzzled about one thing. That is why I want to save the barbarians. If they could be wiped out in the epidemic, it would undoubtedly be a good thing for the Empire. Hearing this, I patiently explained to Vicky I owe the barbarians a great favor. If they hadn't rescued me from the clutches of the man-pumpkin giant spider, I would probably have been doomed. Though half of these words were made up on the spot, Vicky believed them all without any resistance. But when he learned of his ability after being unable to govern all the affairs of the city well, I then sent him to find someone. That person was Wendy, the criminal I had previously released. It sounds like a good plan, but Vicky doesn't know where Wendy lives at all. Finding him won't be difficult for me. Then I asked Vicky again, "Do you remember the little girl who once took away the reward of 10 billion gold coins? If my guess is right, Wendy is almost certainly there. If Wendy refuses to cooperate in managing the city, at least let him know that I'm not dead yet." After explaining everything thoroughly, I must quickly proceed with the next plan, to find the magical holy water that can cure the Red Death. And all this stems from a pact with Aye that I must uphold. Meanwhile, at the Cavadas family, a merchant is preparing to be searched by the city gate guards. Seeing this, he takes out his goods and says that he is also a frequent visitor to the Cavadas district. The guard understood that the merchant wanted to save time but still told him he must at least check one. Just at the moment the guard chose one, the merchant's expression immediately became panicked. It turns out that among all the oil drums, the one chosen by the guard was the only one with a trick hidden inside. The merchant thought to himself that he was definitely done for. But when it was opened, the guard did not find anything unusual. When told that there was no problem and he could pass through, the merchant finally relaxed and heaved a sigh of relief. What appeared before him next was exactly the Kavadas family's district, St. Mecca. As for the merchant, he arrived at a deserted alleyway and then spoke to a suspicious oil drum, saying, "There are no guards patrolling nearby. You can come out now." The next second, a person wearing a mask stood up from inside the oil drum. That person was me, Bijier, because the magical holy water I am seeking is right here. So I had to resort to this strategy. Having merchants who frequently enter and exit St. Mecca secretly transport me inside. After the deed was done, I gave him the agreed reward, which is none other than the horn on the top of a rhinoceros's head. Its value goes without saying, yet this was also my way of ensuring to the utmost extent that the merchant keeps quiet to prevent my whereabouts from being exposed. Even after receiving the reward, the merchant still looked as if he hadn't seen much of the world because I actually held my breath in an oil drum for 2.5 hours. In his view, I didn't look like a human at all. Afterwards, I came to the busiest central area, hid in the clock tower of the St. Mecca district. Although this is not the safest place, the me from a past life knew that Kavadas was influenced by religion. As long as the clock tower chimes, they would all stop in their tracks and close their eyes, performing a strange ritual right there. And at this moment, it is 2 seconds before the bell tower rings. Quickly, as soon as the time came, the bell tower started ringing. Upon hearing it, people immediately stood still and prayed with palms together. Despite my swaggering through the crowd, none of them noticed my presence. When the night grew deep and quiet, I found a well. Then, I opened a bottle containing a pink liquid, ready to pour it all into the well water. However, it's not something like a laxative that's being tipped out, but rather a red death-infecting bacterium extracted from the corpse. Although this method is indeed excessive, to obtain the holy water, this is the only way. Just at this moment, 3 children suddenly appeared behind me, looking at me sneakily, not knowing what I was doing at the well. They subconsciously wanted to run away, but how could I let them go so easily? I suddenly turned back, told them that this well was cursed. Anyone who drinks its water will surely die. To stay alive, remember my words. As soon as I finished speaking, 3 children ran away in fright. Seeing this, I felt relieved. Such a terrifying warning, the children probably wouldn't dare to approach the well anymore. Then, I stuck a dagger into the ground. That one engraved with the Levi family's emblem. You must know, the Kavadis family, and they are sworn enemies. As long as it's made to appear as the work of the Levis, at that time, the conflict will surely flare up dramatically. At this point, the plan has been perfectly executed. Next is to go find the Saint of Kavadas, Dolores. Kneel. The 800-pound knees have finally knelt down. I knelt in front of the palace gates for 2.5 whole days, only to pay homage to a common pawn statue. But I merely took out a water pouch and the palace guards suddenly surrounded me. Just a few minutes ago, even though it was late at night, the area outside the palace was still crowded. Most of these people were the nobles and officials from the city, flaunting their power and position. Upon their arrival, they began to boast about the honors and merits they had obtained. Some were there to seek a marriage with the statue, and there were even those there to use the statue to commit murder. After not long, a hollow female voice emanated from the palace. This person is precisely the saintess these people were seeking. The statue is merely a tool for her to speak to visitors. Please do not linger here any longer. It is already very late. I will not open the door to meet anyone. Upon hearing this, everybody tactfully left the place. But only I truly knew the saintess's refusal was not simply because it was too late, but rather that no one's appeals could gain her approval. It turns out that before I was reborn, I had seen countless saintesses on the front lines of the battlefield to treat the wounded. Their white holy robes would often be stained with blood. But as time gradually passed, the saintesses began to develop a deep loathing for money and power. They felt that without these things, there would be no large-scale wars between nations causing casualties. Just at that moment, the holy woman suddenly questioned why I still refused to leave here. Upon hearing this, I immediately knelt down on the ground. Then, with a crying voice, I told the holy woman in the palace, "I am a lost soul. I cannot find the meaning of my own life." Unexpectedly, at the next moment, the holy woman, who originally didn't want to see anyone, actually opened the gate for me. But all this was just an act, all for the sake of gaining her initial approval. When I walked into the palace, the saint met me in the form of a statue. But this was completely within reason. How could she casually meet me, a stranger in bizarre attire? And upon seeing me, the saint resolutely asked, "What exactly is it that could make you lose your way and direction in life?" Upon hearing this, I silently took out a water bag and placed it beside the pool. Then I spoke to the holy woman. "I am here to report someone contaminating the well water in the slums with a plague virus. If you truly are the holy woman, nature itself makes it easy to perceive the extremely fierce disaster contained within. Yet I originally thought the plan would continue from there." Unexpectedly, the holy woman revealed that all I had just said were lies. Before I could even object, noisy clanking of armor came from upstairs. Immediately following, a well-prepared guard squad appeared right above my head. The leader sternly questioned, "Who are you? What is your purpose in coming to this sacred place?" In contrast, I recognized the identity of the leader at a glance. He is called Bedler. He was recognized by me in a previous life as the most righteous person. Even in order to erase all injustice in the world, his methods could be 100 times more cruel than demons slaughtering humans. The torture inflicted on the 7th young master in the dungeon earlier was also all learned from his hands. Now that we meet again, I don't want to dwell on the past, but to tell Bedler that I have made my affairs clear. Just as I turned to leave the palace, a magical attack suddenly swept in front of me. Looking at the paper stuck on the wall, I couldn't help but snicker. This life's Bedler hasn't changed a bit, still likes using strange things as weapons. On the other hand, Bedler is angrily scolding, "Do you think I would let a suspicious person like you leave?" Immediately after, he leapt down from the 2nd floor. "The water pouch you brought indeed has an evil aura, but if it really contains the plague virus, then you can't escape the suspicion of being the spreader." Hearing this, I calmly responded, "If I really were the person spreading the news, to report it myself would be like walking into a trap." Before I finished my speech, Bedler began casting a spell, firing dozens of magic-infused papers towards me. But such an attack poses no threat to me. Even taking it head-on wouldn't likely hurt me in the slightest. It's just that I currently cannot use any skills related to Baskerville. Otherwise, my identity would definitely be exposed. Then naturally, Hugo would soon receive the news that I'm not dead yet. It seems that the only thing I can resort to now is to use the skill of the gluttonous sword. I strike directly at Bedler's apex with the move Upside Down Hook. Although this move did not hit immediately, it was accompanied by the 1,000-pound drop skill acquired from hunting the horned bear. Even the battle-hardened Bedler couldn't easily handle it, and the moment I landed, I immediately dashed close to Bedler, throwing a punch so fast that the naked eye couldn't catch it. But the result was unexpectedly Bedler's book was so hard that it could withstand my full-force attack. Seeing this, I immediately unleashed the killer technique I obtained from Cerberus. No matter how tough the book is, fire will inevitably conquer wood, and it's the hellfire that will not extinguish until it turns everything to ash. As for Bedler, fortunately, he had holy water for healing. Otherwise, his hands would probably be ruined. The next second, I saw Bedler gather defensive magic in his hands. Then he quickly swung his fists at me. Seeing this, I didn't dodge at all. Instead, I simply used the tip of my foot to flick up the book that was still burning. Afraid of the hellfire contaminating his body, Bedler immediately switched from attack to defense. Little did he know, this very move would be the perfect opportunity for me to defeat him in one blow. And after being hit directly by my powerful punch, Bedler, driven by inertia, straight away smashed the statue into pieces. Then, spewing blood, he passed out temporarily. The soldiers upstairs turned pale when they saw him. They truly didn't expect General Bedler, who had never been defeated, to actually be defeated by an unknown assailant. But to protect the safety of the palace, they still had to risk their lives to guard this place. Just as I was about to eliminate the soldiers blocking me, suddenly, a blonde girl appeared upstairs. Everyone stopped right there. Upon closer inspection, indeed, this person was the Saint Dolores I was looking for. He then asked me, "Are you the lost soul? But seeing the destruction you've caused to the palace, I think you look more like a wounded hunting dog. Come with me. Let's sit down and talk this through." At that moment, I had a bad feeling. Has Dolores already guessed who I am? The young girl merely shed a single tear and saved the dying masses afflicted by the plague. It turns out that she is Dolores, the saint of today with divine powers. However, she has a unique peculiarity. That is, she does not treat ailments that are not genuine illnesses. Previously, the nobles and merchants who crowded day and night in front of the city gates, Dolores keeps turning them away, refusing to see them, because the ailments they seek to cure are nothing more than marital issues or athlete's foot and bad breath, among others. Hearing this, I too feel sympathy. After all, using divine power on such things feels simply wasteful. Yet, I hold every saint in high regard, only because in every past life during the struggle against demons, the Holy Maiden, who had no attack power, always managed to rush to the front lines to heal the severely wounded. The number of people she saved was countless. They could truly be seen as the epitome of goodness in this world. But just then, Dolores suddenly started talking to me about everyday trivial matters, saying that her recent stress had been so overwhelming that she couldn't breathe. Originally, her returning home on vacation was meant to be a chance to truly relax for a few days, but instead, she ended up being harassed by that group of people every day. Hearing this, I hurriedly changed the subject. If this continues, I'm afraid the contagion will become uncontrollable. I can understand that you're feeling agitated, but the most important thing right now should be addressing the plague in the slums. At this point, Dolores once again posed to me a soul-searching question. Are you sure you really saw someone poisoning the well and the water? Did you keep it yourself, or was it brought over by a villager at your request? After listening, I didn't know how to respond for a moment, but it's normal for you to have doubts about me. It seems now I am forced to execute my next plan. Who knew my hand just moved a little in my pocket? Bedler, standing by, instantly heightened his alertness. He then quickly stepped in front of Dolores and challenged, "What on earth are you trying to do, kid?" The next second, just around the palm of my hand, suddenly there was a radiant holy force surrounding it. This left Dolores staring blankly in awe. But since I could wield this power, Dolores believed I must be a believer like her. Then I beat my chest and spoke passionately. I really don't want my hometown to be destroyed. So can you now truly believe what I say? Dolores gave an affirmative response, but he still didn't understand who would do such a despicable thing. Upon hearing this, I pulled out a map, then suggested that the culprit likely wants St. Mecca to completely decline and to profit from it. Then I pointed out the location of the Levi family. They often engage in the research and production of poison. It is most likely the most profitable. Moreover, if Kavadas can be weakened, it is undoubtedly icing on the cake for them who rarely have archenemies. Moreover, the Levi family is a financial oligarchy. The death of workers will directly lead to the bankruptcy of landlords. This way they can purchase top-quality goods at extremely low prices. However, I can make these precise speculations thanks to the merchant who deceived the barbarians last time. So I told Dolores, the Levi family is very likely to be closely linked to this disease situation. Of course, this is just a hypothesis of mine. As a result, Dolores was very surprised after hearing this. He really didn't expect that I could predict the future direction so accurately. This made him even more eager to know who I really am. In the end, all I could tell him was just the pseudonym Night Dog that represents my identity. Dolores can see through her own eyes but sees countless vortexes of emotions hidden in my heart. There is violence, hatred, resentment, a bloody, beastly smell, and so on and so forth. Most serious of all is that profound sadness that one cannot fathom. Then Dolores instructs Bedler that they must first visit the slums now, then investigate the actual situation of the plague and report to the superiors. After arriving at the slums, the atmosphere here is indeed quite oppressive. When the local believers see the saint coming with her guards, they immediately pray for her to heal the patients tormented by the plague. At this moment, Dolores realizes the seriousness of the situation. This also made her fully believe what I had said. In contrast, I am patiently inspecting the patients lying on the ground. It seems that the way I scared the children that day indeed worked. All infected with the plague are adults. Yet for this, I still have to apologize to them. Although the initial symptoms of the plague are not fatal, the torment on the body and mind is still extremely severe. As for what follows, it's Dolores' turn to take action. She clenched her fists and made a praying gesture, following which she recited the saint's magical incantation. As her tears fell to the ground, Dolores's body suddenly burst into golden light, even able to turn the dark night directly into day. And under the sacred light, patients infected with the plague were cured immediately. At this moment, whether the public or the believers, all shed tears of gratitude. Now that the holy water has appeared, what I have to do next is to find a way to deliver it to the barbarian tribes. The patient's body is covered with red spots, and he is close to death. Yet the chief doctor is not in a hurry to treat him. Instead, he is frantically feeding him food. Even after the patient was fully fed and watered, a huge incision was made over his heart with a knife. Those present doubted my competence, suspecting me of being a quack. Little did they know that just 2.5 minutes had passed, and they were all left speechless by the patient's condition. Among them was the saintly Dolores, who, apart from being surprised, felt mostly admiration, for I had managed to intertwine divine power with medical skill so wondrously. Yet just a few minutes earlier, Dolores herself had been tormented by a vexing problem to the point of losing sleep. Looking at the newly added infection areas on the map, she deeply knew that the divine power was only a temporary measure to contain the plague. It fundamentally couldn't prevent new patients from appearing. Moreover, from the analysis of the bodily fluids extracted from the patients, the incubation period of the plague is very short. Although the patients do not die quickly, they must endure both physical and mental torment. Therefore, to completely eradicate the plague, Dolores needs to concentrate all her energy, using the purest holy water to purify the poisoned well. As for the dilemma, it also arises here. If we are to fully contain the growth of the plague, she would have to give up treating some of the patients. At this moment, Dolores suddenly felt darkness before her eyes. Then she collapsed on the ground, powerless. Clearly, the excessive use of divine power had overstretched her body. But even so, she gritted her teeth and persevered. She feels that using even a bit more effort could alleviate the suffering of the sick populace. Then she would continue treating them, even if it exhausted her to death. Just stepping out of the room, Dolores's eyes appeared extra bewildered. It turned out that right outside the door stood the 3 noble youths who had earlier sought redemption, speaking about the 3 carriages of emergency supplies they had brought. Everyone claimed it was to alleviate the Saintess's pressure, but then they revealed their ugly true faces, which made Dolores feel extremely disgusted. This dirty and damp slum is not a place for a noble saintess. If these lowlifes get their hands on the emergency supplies, will they lose their original independence? Dolores turned her head and walked away after hearing this. But those 3 still insisted on being resolutely the support for the saintess unto death. Hearing this, Dolores also came up with a clever plan. Immediately, she turned back and replied affectionately, "I'll leave the distribution of supplies entirely up to you. Just don't disappoint me." As soon as she finished speaking, the hearts of the 3 were instantly filled with excitement. Just when they arrived at the place to treat the patients, they immediately regretted agreeing to help the holy woman. Everything here made them feel nauseous and unbearable. Naturally, this is what Dolores wanted to see. For her, offering solicitude when there's no affair must be either treachery or theft. Help with ulterior motives is also an ugly act of desecrating the gods. Meanwhile, the priest here just healed some patients with mild conditions. Seeing this, Dolores did not feel relieved. Now she must go to an even more dangerous place where the slums gather the most severe plague-infected patients. Even though the places she visits are purified by a holy force relying solely on her strength, she ultimately cannot solve it easily. But in the next second, Dolores's expression instantly changed from serious to stunned, because at this moment, I am taking her place, treating the critically ill. I saw my hand raise the knife and slice through the skin at the red spots. Immediately thereafter, summoning the holy power restored the rash along with the wound back to a healthy state. And this scene also gave the newly arrived priest hope for reviving critically ill patients. Widely acknowledged the direct injection of divine power into the infected area as a treatment method. As for Dolores, she was very impressed. She really didn't expect that I could combine medical skills and divine power to such an extent. However, Dolores's reaction was also within reason. After all, being able to utilize divine power to its fullest, she is the only one. And the reason why I can use the power of the divine is all because my soul carries the karma accumulated from a past life. As long as I slay demons for humanity, there is also a chance to be recognized by the gods and use their power. and it might even be a more advanced, divine power. Normally, the devotion to deities determines the amount of power one receives, which is the so-called 1-to-1 ratio. But it's not the same with the advanced ones. They can break the original equation, turning the past 1-to-1 into 1-to-10, even my current 1-to-100. At that moment, a little girl suddenly started crying loudly. Seeing this, I immediately turned around to comfort her. "Your mom will be all right soon." Then I took out a coin and gave it to the little girl, telling her to buy some nourishing food for her mom. Unexpectedly, my action was quickly stopped by the priest, indicating that in the slums here, material aid is strictly prohibited. Meanwhile, the locals caring for their sick also observed, all showing a greedy look. This is exactly what the pastor was worried about. In contrast, I appeared calm and composed. After all, I have only that one bag of money. Though it is quite limited, I will give it to the patients who really need it. But now that it has come to this, I still have to say sorry. Upon hearing this, Dolores was completely baffled. She couldn't guess at all why I needed to apologize.